You're going to work on top of a magazine to make it easier to score the paper. What I mean by that is when you line up a ruler on one of these thick, heavy lines and trace, you will actually be making a slight dent in the paper. And you should be able to feel that if you press hard enough. Trace all 4 of the thick dotted lines right here. On this end where it says the word column, I'm also going to trace along the thin line right here, if I'm going to use this as one of the columns at the base of my structure. So I trace along this line right here. Next step, I'm going to mountain fold each of these. Mountain fold is where you bend so that the line is visible on top like a mountain. The opposite would be a valley fold like this. So first mountain fold all 4 of these lines. I fold and then I unfold. I'm going to turn around and do this side. So I'm going to do on this line right here and this line right here. So you end up with actual 5 panels. Next, I'm going to take one side, I'm going to fold 2 of these panels towards the middle like this and then overlap one panel from the other side like that. I don't want to try to hold it in my hand while I'm taping it. If I do that, this end actually, this side will be smaller than the other ones, and you won't have a square shape. So the best way to do this is to lay it down like this, flat on the table. I take one long piece of tape, put it over that border between this flap and the rest of the column, and I covered tape over most of this. I'm going to take some tape and fold it around to the other side here. It makes it much stronger. I'm going to put a piece of tape on this end right here. I don't want to just fold it around like that. That will not be it. I won't be able to open it up. So I want to hold it like this. I'm going to push the tape around to the inside here and squeeze it down on the inside. Do the same thing on the other end. So I have the tape sticking out over the end. I'm going to take this, wrap it around the inside, just like that. If you need to cut one of these shorter, and say if I cut this in half right here, the tape I would then add another piece of tape so that I could get it to wrap around. This will make it much stronger this way. If I'm going to use this column on one of the base pieces, I need to be able to open these flaps out. So to do that, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut up to these lines that I drew before. I'm going to fold these flaps out like this, and then I'll be able to tape that down onto my board. If you want a long column or beam, you're going to connect pieces together end to end as follows. So they won't fit together very well like this, and you wouldn't want to tape it together like that. But what you can do is cut along 4 edges at one end of a column as far as the thin dotted line. And you're going to slightly bend in 2 of the flaps across from each other, and you can bend the other 2 flaps out, and that will allow you to slide it over one of these columns. This one has not been cut. So I pinch in 2, let the other 2 go to the outside, get it to fit in there. Alright, make sure it's straight up and down. It's not tipping one way or the other. I like to look down one end and make sure that it's straight. Before putting a piece of tape, you can do one large piece of tape. If you line it up like this. Or I can use a couple small pieces of tape. To make a beam, you take one of these sheets for the beam, and you're going to make it in the same way that you make a column, by tracing along the heavy dotted lines and folding and taping. First step is to trace along the heavy dotted lines. Next step is to make mountain folds along all of the thick dotted lines. Take 2 of the panels, fold them inward. Take one panel from the other direction, fold it inward so that you have the overlap right in the middle here. Use one long piece of tape and then a couple small pieces. And again, I make this so that it sticks out over the end. And you can see the tape right there. And then I fold it so that it goes on the inside. That way there's no piece loose right here. Put the tape like this, fold it around the inside. That way the paper is not going to be loose. It's all taped together, secure. Now you may need to trim the beam before you attach it to the column. In this case, if I were attaching from this column to this column, I would not need to trim it. I would use the full length. But if I'm going to attach from this column to this one, I'll need to trim it to the correct length. And what I would do here is I would put the far end of this beam, line it up with the far end of this column, and then I would put a mark, show where the far end of the beam will be here and here. And that show me where I'm going to cut and where I'm going to just trace and then fold. Alright, so I'm going to cut it to this length right here. And then along this line is where I'm going to be folding flaps. So to make that easier, I'm going to trace along that thin line. I'm going to do the same thing at the other end. Next step is to cut along each edge as far as that line that I just traced. I don't need to fold all 4 flaps back on both ends. I need to just fold back 2 on each end that are opposite each other, like this. In most cases, this is how it will work. Okay, then you slide the beam between the 2 columns that you want to connect, and make sure that it's horizontal unless you purposely want it to be tilted one way or the other. And I'm going to put tape along the flaps at the top on both sides, and put tape on all the other flaps that you see.